Commander Veltar stood on the observation deck of the Galactic Defense Coalition training facility. His forearms crossed behind his back as he watched the newest arrivals step off their transport ship. The humans had finally arrived. The reptilian commander's yellow eyes studied the small group with growing disappointment. These were Earth's finest soldiers? They looked like children playing dress-up in oversized military gear. The first human to exit the ship was clearly their leader. She moved with purpose, but her frame seemed so fragile. Captain Jiwan, according to the files Veltar had reviewed. She stood barely 6 feet tall, which made her tiny compared to most galactic species. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her brown eyes scanned the facility with quiet intensity. Behind her came Sergeant Hyunwoo, a stocky male who seemed to take in every detail of their surroundings. His movements were careful and measured. Then came the others. Corporal Minho, who looked young enough to still be in school. Private Yuna, a small female carrying medical equipment. And Private Dae-hyun, the heaviest of the group but still smaller than most alien recruits. "Look at them," Veltar muttered to his aide, Lieutenant Kexmore. "They look like they would break if someone sneezed too hard." Kexmore, also a Catherian with scales that shimmered blue-green, nodded in agreement. The report said humans were weak, but I did not expect them to be this small. How did such a species even survive on their home planet? Veltar had been asking himself the same question. He had commanded troops for over 200 years. He had seen the mighty Vorthak, crystalline beings who stood 12 feet tall and could crush steel with their bare hands. He had fought alongside the Chitauri, insect-like warriors whose natural armor could stop plasma blasts. His own people, the Catherians, were known throughout the galaxy for their strength and fighting spirit. But these humans, they looked like they belonged in a medical facility, not on a battlefield. The human squad was directed to the equipment bay for their initial gear assignment. Veltar decided to observe their first real test. He made his way down to the lower levels where new recruits were fitted with standard coalition gear. The equipment quartermaster, a massive Vorthak named Grundal, handed Captain Jiwan a standard rifle. The weapon, designed for beings with superior strength, nearly knocked her backward when she tried to lift it. She struggled to hold it steady, her arms shaking under the weight. "Perhaps you should try the training weapons first," Grundal suggested, his crystal voice ringing with what might have been sympathy. Jiwan's jaw tightened. "We will make do with standard equipment." Veltar watched as the human team struggled with basic gear. Dae-hyun could barely carry the heavy weapons pack assigned to him. Yuna needed help lifting the medical supply kit. Minho looked overwhelmed by the communications equipment. Only Hyunwoo seemed to adapt quickly, though even he moved more slowly than other species. The next test was physical conditioning. Veltar followed the group to the training grounds where new recruits underwent basic fitness evaluations. The obstacle course had been designed to challenge the strongest species in the galaxy. Walls that required great strength to climb, barriers that needed speed to cross, and endurance tests that pushed even veteran warriors to their limits. The Chitauri recruits moved through the course like natural athletes. Their 6 legs gave them incredible speed and stability. The Vorthak used their size and strength to simply smash through obstacles. Even the smaller Zalaxian recruits used their natural agility to dance through the challenges. Then came the humans. Captain Jiwan approached the first wall, which stood 15 feet high. Most species either jumped it or climbed it with ease. Jiwan had to search for handholds, pulling herself up slowly. Her face showed strain with every movement. "Pathetic," whispered one of the Chitauri observers. Hyunwoo followed his captain, moving with the same careful deliberation. He helped boost Minho up the wall, then waited for Yuna and Dae-hyun. The entire human team moved as a unit, helping each other overcome obstacles that other species handled alone. At the strength test station, the results were even more embarrassing. The machine measured lifting capacity, grip strength, and endurance. Every human scored in the bottom 10% of all recorded results. Veltar shook his head in disgust. How did the coalition leadership approve this? These humans will be slaughtered in their first real battle. But something caught his attention. While other species celebrated their high scores or complained about poor performance, the humans gathered around their results display. Instead of looking defeated, they were taking notes. Jiwan pointed at different numbers while Hyunwoo made marks on a data pad. "What are they doing?" Kexmore asked. I believe they are studying their weaknesses, Veltar replied, though he said it with contempt. As if knowing about their limitations will somehow make them stronger. The weapons training was the final humiliation. The humans could barely handle the recoil from standard energy weapons. Their accuracy was poor compared to species with enhanced eyesight or natural targeting abilities. Daehyun, supposedly their heavy weapons specialist, needed both hands to steady a weapon that most soldiers could fire one-handed. During the training session, Veltar overheard a group of Chitauri soldiers making jokes about the humans. I heard they come from a world with weak gravity, one chittered. That explains why they are so soft. My clutch siblings were stronger when they hatched, another added. Perhaps we should request they be assigned to guard duty only. Keep them away from real combat. Veltar found himself nodding in agreement. The humans were clearly not ready for the kind of warfare the Coalition faced. The galaxy was a dangerous place filled with hostile species and unknown threats. These soft humans would only get themselves and others killed. That evening, Veltar filed his preliminary report on the human contingent. He recommended they be assigned to non-combat roles: logistics, medical support, communications. Anything that would keep them away from actual fighting. As he finished his report, an emergency alert flashed on his communication screen. A priority message from Coalition Command. The mining colony on Kepler 442b was under attack. The Ravager horde had struck without warning, overwhelming the colony's defenses. Hundreds of civilians were trapped, and the situation was desperate. All available combat units were being mobilized for immediate deployment. The message included a list of assigned forces: Kitherian shock troops, Vorthak heavy assault teams, Chitauri rapid response units, and the human squad. Veltar stared at the screen in disbelief. Someone at command had lost their mind. Sending the humans into combat against the Ravagers was not just foolish, it was murder. The Ravagers were savage creatures that fought with tooth and claw. They showed no mercy, took no prisoners, and fought to the death. They were everything the humans were not: strong, vicious, and completely without fear. He activated his communicator to protest the assignment, but before he could make the call, he saw the humans walking past his office window. They were heading toward the armory, their faces calm and determined. Captain Jiwon walked with the same quiet confidence she had shown since arriving. Her team followed close behind, checking equipment and talking in low voices. They did not look afraid. They did not look like soldiers about to face certain death. They looked like they had been expecting this moment all along. Veltar closed his communicator without making the call. Perhaps it was better to let the humans learn their limitations the hard way. It would be a harsh lesson, but maybe it would convince Coalition Command that not every species was meant for warfare. As he watched the human squad disappear into the armory, Veltar felt something he had not experienced in decades: doubt about his own judgment. There was something about these humans that he could not understand, something that made them different from other weak species he had encountered. But whatever it was, he was certain it would not be enough to keep them alive in the battles to come. The Coalition cruiser Unity's Edge cut through space toward the Kepler system. Its massive hull carried over 3,000 troops from a dozen different species, all heading toward what promised to be a brutal battle. Veltar made his rounds through the ship, checking on the various military units. The Kitherian troops were sharpening their weapons and reviewing battle tactics. The Vorthak were running power checks on their heavy armor systems. The Chitauri were organizing their swarm formations. Everyone was preparing for war in their own way. Then he found the humans. They had been assigned a small section in the lower decks, appropriate for their support role. Veltar expected to find them nervous, maybe scared. Instead, he discovered something he had not anticipated. Captain Jiwon sat at a small table, surrounded by data pads and holographic displays. She was studying every piece of information about the Ravagers that the Coalition database contained. Battle reports, tactical analyses, biological studies. She absorbed it all with intense focus. "Captain," Veltar said as he approached. Jiwon looked up from her reading. "Commander Veltar, is there something you need? I was conducting inspections, making sure all units are ready for deployment." "We are ready," Jiwon replied simply, then returned to her studies. Veltar noticed that the information she was reading was not standard briefing material. These were detailed reports from previous Ravager encounters, some of them classified documents that required special clearance to access. "How did you obtain these files?" he asked. "I requested them from Coalition intelligence. When you are about to fight an enemy, it helps to understand how they think." Sergeant Yunwu looked up from his own datapad. "The Ravagers are not just animals, Commander. They have patterns, tactics. They learn from their mistakes." Veltar was surprised. Most species simply relied on their natural advantages in combat. The Catherians used their strength and four-armed fighting style. The Vorthak depended on their size and crystal armor. The Chitauri overwhelmed enemies with numbers and speed. But the humans were studying their enemy like scientists preparing for an experiment. "What patterns have you discovered?" Veltar asked, curious despite himself. Jiwan gestured to her display. "Ravagers prefer to attack in 3 waves. First, they send scouts to test defenses and identify weak points. Then they use a main assault to break through the strongest positions. Finally, they flood through with everything they have." "Most species know this," Veltar said. "Yes, but they also have backup strategies. If the main assault fails, they switch to siege tactics. They try to starve defenders out by cutting off supply lines. If that does not work, they use terror attacks to break morale." Hyunwoo added, "They are more intelligent than people give them credit for. They adapt to their enemy's strengths and exploit their weaknesses." Veltar studied the humans more carefully. Their physical training scores had been terrible, but their analytical skills seemed impressive. "And how do you plan to use this information?" "We are still working on that," Jiwan admitted. "But knowing your enemy is the first step to defeating them." Veltar moved on to observe the rest of the human team. He found Corporal Minho practicing close-quarters combat techniques in an empty cargo bay. The young soldier moved through a series of fighting forms that looked strange to Veltar's eyes. Most galactic species fought using their natural weapons: claws, fangs, armored shells, or enhanced strength. But Minho was practicing with just his hands and feet, using techniques that seemed designed for a species without natural weapons. Private Yuna was in the medical bay, talking with the ship's doctors about Ravager physiology. She was learning about their anatomy, their weak points, and the most effective ways to treat wounds caused by their attacks. "Are you expecting heavy casualties?" Veltar asked her. "I am expecting to save lives," Yuna replied. "Human, alien, it does not matter. Everyone deserves to go home." Veltar found Private Daehyun in the weapons maintenance section. The human was examining Coalition weaponry with the ship's armorer, a gruff Catherian named Zexatul. "This weapon has too much recoil for human physiology," Daehyun was saying. "But if we modify the grip and add a stabilizing system here, it becomes much more manageable." Zexatul looked skeptical. "Those modifications will reduce the weapon's power output." "Not by much. And the increased accuracy will make up for the reduced damage. A shot that hits is better than a powerful shot that misses." Veltar watched as Daehyun continued to suggest modifications. The human seemed to understand the weapons better than soldiers who had been using them for years. That evening, Veltar attended the mission briefing in the main conference room. The intelligence officer, a tall Zalaxian named Quixara, presented the latest information about the situation on Kepler 442b. "The Ravager force is larger than initially estimated," she announced. "We now count approximately 15,000 enemy troops compared to our original estimate of 5,000. Murmurs of concern rippled through the assembled commanders. 15,000 Ravagers was a formidable force even for the Coalition's best troops. "Recommended deployment strategy remains unchanged," Quixara continued. "Catherian shock troops will lead the main assault. Vorthak heavy units will provide fire support. Chitauri squads will handle flanking maneuvers and rapid response." "What about the humans?" asked Commander Grixnell of the Chitauri forces. "The human unit will be assigned to rear guard duty, protecting the landing zone and supply lines." Veltar noticed that Captain Jiwan did not protest this assignment. In fact, she seemed to be taking notes as if the rear guard position was exactly what she had wanted. After the briefing, Veltar found himself walking beside the human captain. "You do not seem disappointed by your assignment," he observed. "Every position in a battle is important," Jiwan replied. "The rear guard protects the army's lifeline. Without secure supply lines, the best troops in the galaxy cannot win." "That is a very mature attitude for such an inexperienced unit." Jiwan stopped walking and looked at him directly. "Commander, may I ask you something?" "Of course. What do you know about human military history?" Veltar was puzzled by the question. Very little. Your species only recently joined the galactic community. Your wars were small, primitive affairs. Our wars were fought on one planet, that is true, but they were not small. In our last global conflict, over 60 million humans died. We fought in deserts, jungles, mountains, and frozen wastelands. We fought in conditions that would kill most species, before they could even engage the enemy. Veltar felt a slight chill at the matter-of-fact way she stated these numbers. We learned something from those wars, Jiwan continued. We learned that the strongest army does not always win. Sometimes the army that adapts fastest wins. Sometimes the army that refuses to give up wins. She resumed walking, leaving Veltar to consider her words. The next day brought more troubling news. Long-range scans revealed that the Ravager force had grown to over 20,000 troops. Worse, they had captured most of the colony's defensive installations and were using them against any rescue attempts. In the ship's cantina, Veltar overheard conversations between troops from different species. The mood was growing pessimistic. 20,000 Ravagers, a Vorthak trooper was saying. Even with our armor, those are not good odds. They have been preparing for weeks, added a Chitauri soldier. They know we are coming. Maybe we should wait for reinforcements, suggested another voice. But when Veltar looked toward the human section of the cantina, he saw something different. The 5 humans sat together, talking quietly but intently. They did not look worried or defeated. If anything, they seemed more focused than before. Sergeant Hyunwoo was sketching diagrams on a datapad, showing different tactical formations. Minho was asking questions about coalition equipment and capabilities. Yuna was reviewing medical procedures for treating different alien species. Daehyun was calculating ammunition requirements and supply logistics. Captain Jiwon sat in the center of her team, listening to everything and occasionally adding her own observations. She looked like a commander preparing for victory, not defeat. Veltar realized that while other species were becoming discouraged by the odds, the humans were simply treating it as another problem to solve. They were not asking whether they could win. They were figuring out how to win. For the first time since meeting them, Veltar began to wonder if he had misjudged the human soldiers. They might be physically weak compared to other galactic species, but there was something else about them. Something he could not quite identify. As the Unity's edge approached the Kepler system, Veltar found himself hoping that the humans would prove him wrong about their capabilities. He was about to find out just how wrong he had been. The surface of Kepler 442b was worse than anyone had expected. The planet's twin suns created a harsh landscape of red rock and deep shadows. Violent winds carried dust storms that could strip paint from metal. The mining colony sat in a valley surrounded by steep cliffs and narrow canyons, perfect territory for an ambush. Veltar stood in the command post, watching tactical displays as coalition forces deployed across the valley. The Catherian shock troops took positions on the left flank, their 4 arms allowing them to carry heavy weapons and shields simultaneously. The Vorthak heavy units established firing positions on the ridgeline, their crystalline armor glinting in the strange light. The Chitauri rapid response teams spread out in loose formations, ready to swarm any breakthrough. And in the rear, far from the main battle lines, the human squad set up their position near the landing zone. All units. This is command, Veltar announced over the communication system. Enemy forces are estimated at 22,000 Ravagers, well entrenched in the colony buildings and cave systems. Our objective is to secure the colony and evacuate all civilian survivors. Through his binoculars, Veltar could see the Ravagers moving through the damaged buildings. They were humanoid but larger and more muscular than humans, with natural armor plating and retractable claws. Their faces were predatory with sharp teeth and eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal hunter. Sir, reported Lieutenant Kexmore, we are receiving signals from survivor groups trapped in the central mining facility and the eastern residential complex. How many? At least 400 civilians, possibly more. Veltar studied the tactical situation. The survivors were trapped deep inside Ravager-controlled territory. Any rescue attempt would require fighting through heavily defended positions. Begin Phase 1, he ordered. The Catherian shock troops advanced first, moving in tight formations with shields locked together. Their battle cries echoed across the valley as they charged toward the outer defensive positions. The Ravagers responded immediately. They poured out of buildings and cave entrances, their own war calls mixing with the sound of weapons fire. The two forces crashed together in a chaos of claws, energy weapons, and combat armor. Veltar watched with professional interest as his troops engaged the enemy. The Catherians fought with the skill and strength he expected, their forearms giving them significant advantages in close combat. But the Ravagers were more numerous and seemed to know the terrain better than anticipated. Vorthak units, provide fire support on the eastern positions, he commanded. The crystalline warriors responded with concentrated energy blasts that lit up the battlefield. Their heavy weapons carved through Ravager positions, clearing the way for the advancing troops. But something was wrong. The Ravagers were not fighting like the savage beasts described in most intelligence reports. They were using coordinated tactics, falling back in organized retreats, and setting up crossfires that caught the coalition forces by surprise. "Sir," Kexmore called out, "Chitauri Squad 7 is reporting heavy resistance in the northern canyon. They are requesting backup." Before Veltar could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the command post. "Contact! Enemy forces emerging from underground tunnels, Sector 5. Veltar spun toward the tactical display. Red indicators were appearing behind the coalition lines, far from where any Ravagers were supposed to be. "How did they get behind us?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. They must have used the cave systems to circle around our positions." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The Ravagers had not just prepared defensive positions, they had prepared offensive ones as well. Tunnel networks allowed them to appear anywhere on the battlefield, turning what should have been a straightforward assault into a complex puzzle. "All units, be advised, enemy forces are using underground movement. Watch for surprise attacks from any direction." But the warnings came too late. Reports flooded in from across the battlefield. Catherian 3rd Cohort under heavy attack from the rear. Vorthak heavy unit surrounded in grid 7-7. Chitauri squads being overwhelmed in the eastern approach. Veltar realized they had walked into a trap. The Ravagers had spent weeks preparing for this battle, turning the entire colony into a maze of kill zones and ambush points. "Sir," Kexmore said urgently, "we have Ravagers moving toward the landing zone. They are trying to cut off our retreat route." Veltar looked at the tactical display with growing alarm. A large force of Ravagers was moving through the underground tunnels, heading directly for the rear positions where the humans were stationed. "Alert Captain G1, he ordered. "Tell her to prepare for defensive action." But even as he gave the order, Veltar knew it was probably useless. 5 humans against dozens of Ravagers? It would be a massacre. The communication channel crackled to life with Captain G1's calm voice. "Command, this is Human Squad 1. We have visual contact with enemy forces approaching from the southwest. Estimate 40 to 50 Ravagers moving through canyon approach. Captain, you are ordered to fall back to secondary positions," Veltar replied. "Do not engage directly." There was a pause before G1 responded. "Negative, Command. If we fall back, they will overrun the landing zone and cut off our evacuation route. We are moving to intercept." "Captain, that is not advisable. You are outnumbered 10 to 1. "Understood, Command. Human Squad 1 out." Veltar stared at the communication console in disbelief. The humans were actually going to fight. They were going to throw themselves against overwhelming odds to protect the landing zone. He switched his view to the rear area cameras, expecting to watch the quick destruction of the human squad. Instead, he saw something that made him question everything he thought he knew about warfare. The humans were not running away or taking defensive positions. They were advancing toward the enemy. Captain G1 led her team through the rocky terrain with the same calm determination she had shown since arriving at the training facility. But now, Veltar could see something in her movements that he had missed before. She moved like a predator, choosing her path with the precision of someone who understood exactly how to use the terrain to her advantage. Sergeant Hyunwoo split off with Corporal Minho, taking a position that would allow them to attack the Ravagers from the side. Private Yuna set up a communications relay point while keeping her medical supplies ready. Private Daehyun found an elevated position that gave him clear sight lines across the canyon. They were not just charging blindly into battle. They were executing a coordinated tactical plan. The first Ravagers appeared around a bend in the canyon, moving in a loose formation that showed confidence in their superior numbers. They expected to find frightened defenders hiding behind cover, Instead, they found humans who had turned the canyon into a killing ground. Daehyun's modified weapons opened fire from the high ground, the improved accuracy allowing him to pick off targets with deadly precision. The Ravagers immediately tried to take cover, but Hyunwoo and Minho had positioned themselves to deny the best defensive positions. Captain Jiwon appeared in the center of the canyon, drawing Ravager attention while her team maneuvered into optimal firing positions. The enemy rushed toward her, thinking they could overwhelm a single defender. They were wrong. Jiwon moved through the attacking Ravagers like water flowing around rocks. She was not stronger or faster than her enemies, but she was more precise. Every movement served a purpose. Every shot found its target. Every step took her exactly where she needed to be. Veltar watched in amazement as the human squad held their ground against odds that should have destroyed them in minutes. The Ravagers kept attacking, but they could not break through the human defensive line. "Sir," Kexmore said quietly, "the humans are winning." It seemed impossible, but the evidence was right there on the tactical display. The red indicators representing Ravager forces were disappearing one by one, while the blue dots marking human positions remained steady. But the victory came at a cost. Veltar could see that the humans were taking damage. Minho was limping from a claw wound. Yuna had abandoned her communications equipment to provide battlefield medical care. Daehyun was running low on ammunition, yet they continued fighting. "Command, this is Human Squad 1. Captain Jiwon's voice came over the radio. There was strain in her tone now, but no panic. "Enemy advance has been halted. Landing zone is secure, but we have more contacts approaching from multiple directions." Veltar looked at his tactical display with new understanding. The humans had not just won a single engagement, they had bought time for the entire coalition force to reorganize and respond to the Ravager ambush tactics. "All units," he announced over the general communication channel, "take note of Human Squad 1's defensive techniques. They have successfully neutralized a superior enemy force using tactical positioning and coordinated fire." For the first time since the battle began, Veltar felt hope returning. If 5 humans could hold off 50 Ravagers, perhaps the coalition forces had a chance after all. But the battle was far from over. The Ravagers were regrouping, and more enemy forces were moving through the tunnel systems. The real test was yet to come. As Veltar coordinated the coalition response to the ongoing battle, he found himself constantly checking on the human positions. He had expected them to be the first casualties of the day. The battle had been raging for 3 days and 2 nights without stopping. What should have been a quick rescue mission had turned into a grinding war of attrition that tested every soldier's limits. Veltar had not slept in over 40 hours. His command post was filled with the constant chatter of radio communications, status reports, and tactical updates. The coalition forces were holding their positions, but barely. The Catherian shock troops, despite their natural strength and endurance, were beginning to show signs of exhaustion. The Vorthok heavy units had withdrawn twice to recharge their energy weapons and repair their armor. Even the seemingly endless Chitauri swarms had been forced to rotate their formations to give their soldiers rest, but the humans never stopped. "Sir," Lieutenant Kexmore reported, his voice hoarse from fatigue, "Human Squad 1 is requesting permission to advance on the eastern residential complex." Veltar looked up from his tactical displays with bloodshot eyes. "They want to advance? They have been fighting continuously for 3 days. Yes, sir. Captain G1 reports that her team has identified a weakness in the Ravager defensive pattern." Veltar activated his communication link to the human position. "Captain G1, this is Command. What is your current status?" "We are operational, Command," came the immediate reply. G1's voice sounded tired but steady. "My team has been observing enemy movement patterns. We believe we can reach the trapped civilians in the residential complex." "Captain, that complex is surrounded by over 200 Ravagers. Our intelligence indicates it would require at least a full battalion to break through." "Not if you know the right way in, sir." Veltar switched to the camera feeds from the human position. What he saw defied everything he thought he knew about physical limitations. Private Yuna was treating a wounded Chitauri soldier, while simultaneously monitoring 3 different communication channels. Her medical supplies had run out hours ago, but she had improvised new treatments using materials scavenged from the battlefield. Corporal Minho was maintaining weapons for not just his own squad, but for several alien units as well. His left arm was in a makeshift sling, but he continued working with mechanical precision using only his right hand. Sergeant Hyunwoo was studying topographical maps while coordinating with coalition artillery units. He had been awake for the entire 3-day period, yet his tactical assessments remained sharp and accurate. Private Dae-hyun had transformed the rear guard position into a fortress of improvised defenses. Using damaged equipment and battlefield debris, he had created firing positions that gave maximum advantage to coalition forces. And Captain Ji-won moved between all of these activities, coordinating her team while maintaining awareness of the entire battlefield situation. How are they still functioning? Veltar asked himself. Kexmore overheard the question. Sir, I have been monitoring human bioreadings. Their stress hormones are elevated but within acceptable ranges. Their endurance levels are actually improving as the battle continues. That makes no sense. Every species experiences fatigue after prolonged combat. Not humans, apparently. They seem to become more efficient under pressure. Veltar decided to see for himself. Against standard protocol, he left the command post and made his way to the human position. He found Captain Ji-won crouched behind a makeshift barrier, studying the residential complex through a scope. She looked up as he approached. Commander, what brings you to the front lines? I wanted to understand how your squad continues to operate at full efficiency after 3 days of continuous combat. Ji-won lowered her scope and looked at him directly. We are not operating at full efficiency, sir. We are operating at necessary efficiency. I do not understand the difference. Full efficiency is what you achieve under ideal conditions. Necessary efficiency is what you achieve when people are depending on you to survive. Veltar noticed that despite her calm words, Ji-won's hands showed the strain of constant fighting. Small cuts and burns marked her exposed skin. Her equipment was held together with improvised repairs. Yet her eyes remained alert and focused. Your bio-reading suggests that your species can maintain this pace indefinitely. Not indefinitely, Hyunwoo interjected as he joined the conversation, but longer than most. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. We chased our prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We are built for endurance, not speed. But the Ravagers are also built for endurance, Veltar pointed out. Yes, but they are built for individual endurance. We are built for collective endurance. Minho appeared from behind a supply cache, carrying ammunition for the defensive positions. The Ravagers fight like pack hunters, but they still think like individuals. When one is hurt, the others continue fighting. When one is tired, the others do not compensate. Humans are different, Yuna added as she finished treating another wounded soldier. When one of us is hurt, the others adapt. When one of us is tired, the others take over their responsibilities. We become stronger as a unit when individuals become weaker. Veltar began to understand what he was witnessing. These humans were not just maintaining their fighting effectiveness, they were improving it by sharing their burdens. Show me your plan for the residential complex, he said. Ji-won spread out a hand-drawn map on a nearby crate. The detail was remarkable, showing not just the building layouts but the patrol patterns of Ravager guards, the timing of shift changes, and the locations of defensive weak points. We have been watching them for 2 days, she explained. The Ravagers rotate their guards every 6 hours, but there is a 15-minute gap when the old guards leave before the new guards arrive. During that window, there is a blind spot in their coverage here. She pointed to a narrow alley between 2 damaged buildings. That alley leads to a maintenance tunnel that connects to the residential complex basement. We can reach the civilians without fighting through the main defensive line. Veltar studied the plan. It was audacious and risky, but it might actually work. What about extraction? Even if you reach the civilians, how do you get them out? We create a diversion here, Hyunwoo said, indicating a position on the opposite side of the complex. Draw the Ravagers away from the main exit routes. Then we guide the civilians through the maintenance tunnels to a secondary extraction point. That would require perfect timing and coordination. Yes, sir, Ji-won agreed, but it would save 400 lives. Veltar looked at the 5 humans gathered around the improvised map table. They were exhausted, wounded, and outnumbered by thousands. By all logical analysis, they should be requesting evacuation or reinforcement. Instead, they were volunteering for the most dangerous mission of the entire operation. I cannot authorize this mission with just 5 soldiers, Veltar said finally. Then give us more soldiers, Ji-won replied simply. Every available unit is committed to holding current positions. Then we go alone. Veltar stared at her. Captain, you are asking me to approve a suicide mission. No, sir. I am asking you to approve a rescue mission. Whether it becomes a suicide mission depends on how well we execute it. Over the next several hours, Veltar watched the humans prepare for their mission with the same methodical approach they brought to everything else. They studied every detail, planned for multiple contingencies, and coordinated their efforts with mechanical precision. But what impressed him most was their attitude. They did not approach this as a desperate last resort or a heroic sacrifice. They approached it as a problem that needed solving, and they were confident they could solve it. As the sun set on the third day of battle, Veltar stood in his command post watching the tactical display. The human squad was moving through the Ravager-controlled territory, 5 small blue dots navigating through a sea of red enemy positions. Every instinct told him they would fail. Every piece of military doctrine suggested the mission was impossible. But somehow, Veltar found himself believing that these strange, fragile humans might actually succeed, sir, Kexmore reported. Human Squad 1 has reached the residential complex. They are beginning civilian evacuation procedures. Veltar allowed himself a small smile. Perhaps there was more to strength than physical power after all. Dawn broke on the 4th day of battle with the sound of explosions echoing through the valley. The Ravagers had launched their final assault, throwing everything they had at the coalition forces in a desperate attempt to break the deadlock. Veltar stood in his damaged command post, watching displays that showed red enemy indicators overwhelming blue-friendly positions across the entire battlefield. His communications equipment crackled with desperate reports from units that were running out of ammunition, energy, and hope. Sir, Catherian's 2nd cohort is requesting immediate evacuation. They have lost 60% of their troops. 4th AC heavy units report their armor is failing. They cannot maintain defensive positions much longer. Chitauri formations are breaking up. They are being overwhelmed by superior numbers. The situation was hopeless. The coalition forces had fought bravely for 4 days, but they were facing an enemy that seemed to have unlimited reinforcements. The Ravagers kept coming, wave after wave, until even the strongest defenders were pushed beyond their limits. Sir, Lieutenant Kexmore said quietly, perhaps we should consider a strategic withdrawal. Veltar looked at the tactical display one more time. Every position was compromised. Every unit was taking heavy casualties. The mission to save the mining colony had failed, except for one small section of the battlefield where 5 blue dots continued to move through enemy territory. Human Squad 1. This is command, Veltar called over the radio. What is your current status? Captain Jiwan's voice came back immediately, as calm as ever despite the chaos surrounding her position. Command, we have successfully evacuated 230 civilians from the residential complex. Currently moving to the central mining facility for the remaining survivors. Captain, the situation has changed. All coalition forces are in retreat. You are ordered to abort your mission and return to the landing zone. There was a pause before Jiwan responded. Negative, Command. We still have over 100 civilians trapped in the mining facility. We cannot abandon them. Captain, that is a direct order. Return to base immediately. Sir, with respect, we did not come here to give up when things got difficult. We came here to save lives. Veltar closed his eyes and rubbed his forehead with all 4 hands. The humans were going to get themselves killed trying to save people they had never met. Captain, be advised that you will receive no support for this mission. All other units are withdrawing. Understood, Command. Human Squad 1 will complete the mission alone. Alone. 5 humans against thousands of Ravagers, in a battle that had already defeated the combined might of the galaxy's finest military forces. Sir, Kexmore said, shouldn't we order them to retreat? I have tried. They are not listening. Veltar activated his personal communicator and sent a message to the human squad leader. Captain G1, I want you to know that I think your species is insane. Her reply came back quickly. Yes, sir. That is probably accurate. Despite everything, Veltar found himself laughing. These humans were about to die in a pointless gesture, and they were making jokes about it. But as he watched their progress on the tactical display, he began to realize that their mission might not be as pointless as it appeared. The humans were not just moving through enemy territory, they were disrupting it. Every position they attacked, every patrol they eliminated, Every diversion they created was forcing the Ravagers to redirect troops away from their main assault. Kexmore, look at the enemy movement patterns. What do you see? His aide studied the display carefully. The Ravagers They are pulling troops back from the front lines. They are trying to respond to the human penetration of their rear areas. Exactly. The humans are not just attempting a rescue mission. They are conducting a strategic diversion. Over the next several hours, Veltar watched in amazement as the 5 humans continued to wreak havoc behind enemy lines. They moved like ghosts through the Ravager-controlled territory, appearing where they were least expected, and disappearing before effective countermeasures could be organized. Sergeant Hyunwoo led demolition attacks against Ravager supply depots, using improvised explosives to destroy ammunition and equipment. Corporal Minho infiltrated enemy communication centers, spreading false information that caused confusion in their command structure. Private Yuna provided medical aid to captured coalition soldiers, then helped them escape back to friendly lines. Private Daehyun turned captured Ravager weapons against their former owners, using superior human marksmanship to maximum effect, and Captain Jiwon coordinated it all while personally leading the civilian evacuation efforts. How are they doing this? Veltar asked himself. The answer came from an unexpected source. One of the rescued coalition soldiers, a Chitari warrior named Kliktix, was brought to the command post for debriefing. "Commander," Kliktix said, "I must tell you what I witnessed. The humans, they do not fight like any species I have ever seen." "Explain." "When they rescued me, I was certain we would all die. 5 soldiers against hundreds of enemies? It seemed impossible. But the humans did not try to fight all of them. They made the Ravagers fight each other. I do not understand. They used the enemy's own tactics against them. They created false radio signals that sent Ravager patrols to the wrong locations. They sabotaged equipment so that it would fail at critical moments. They turned the Ravagers' underground tunnel system into a trap that collapsed on them." Kliktix paused, still seeming amazed by what he had witnessed. Most species fight by using their strengths against enemy weaknesses, but humans fight by turning enemy strengths into weaknesses. They made the Ravagers' superior numbers work against them. They made their knowledge of the terrain become a disadvantage. Veltar began to understand what made humans so dangerous in combat. They were not stronger or faster or tougher than their enemies, but they were more adaptable. They could take any situation and find a way to turn it to their advantage. "Sir," Kexmore interrupted, "we are receiving a transmission from Human Squad 1. Captain Jiwon, go ahead." "Command, we have reached the mining facility and are beginning final evacuation procedures. But we have a problem. The Ravager Command Center is located directly above the civilian shelter. We cannot extract the survivors without neutralizing the enemy command structure." Veltar looked at the tactical display. The Ravager Command Center was the most heavily defended position in the entire colony. It would take a full assault brigade to capture it. "Captain, that target is beyond your capabilities. Find another way." "Sir, there is no other way. The command center controls all the security systems in the facility. If we do not take it, the civilians will be trapped forever." "Captain, that is a suicide mission. Even if you succeed, you will not survive the attempt." There was a long pause before Jiwon responded. "Commander, may I tell you something about humans?" "Go ahead." "We have a saying on Earth, no one left behind. It means that we do not abandon our people no matter the cost. These civilians are not human, but they are still our people now. We cannot leave them behind." Veltar stared at the communication console, trying to find words that would convince the humans to abandon their impossible mission. But before he could respond, Kexmore grabbed his arm. "Sir, look at the tactical display." Veltar turned to see something that changed everything. The constant red tide of Ravager indicators had stopped advancing. In fact, they were beginning to pull back from their forward positions. "What is happening?" "The humans, sir. Their attacks on the rear areas have forced the Ravagers to redirect almost 30% of their forces away from the main battle lines. The pressure on our frontline units is decreasing." Veltar realized that the humans had accomplished something that the entire coalition force had failed to achieve. They had broken the Ravager assault momentum. "All units, this is command," he announced over the general communication channel. "Prepare for counterattack. The enemy is withdrawing forces from frontline positions." Over the next few hours, the tide of battle began to turn. Coalition forces that had been on the verge of collapse suddenly found themselves facing reduced enemy pressure. The Catherians rallied and began pushing forward. The Vorthak heavy units resumed their advance. The Chitauri formations reformed and started gaining ground. But Veltar's attention remained focused on the 5 blue dots moving toward the heart of enemy territory. Human Squad 1. This is command. All coalition forces are advancing. The battle situation has improved significantly. Good to hear, Command. But we still have a job to finish. Veltar made a decision that surprised even himself. Captain G1, be advised that I am personally joining your mission. Sir, if humans believe that no one should be left behind, then that includes you. I am bringing a strike team to assist with the assault on the command center. The response came back immediately. Welcome to the party, Commander. As Veltar gathered his personal guard and prepared to join the humans in their impossible mission, he reflected on everything he had learned over the past 4 days. Strength was not just about physical power. Courage was not just about fearlessness. Victory was not just about superior weapons or numbers. Sometimes, the strongest warriors were the ones who refused to give up when everyone else said the battle was lost. The humans had taught him that lesson, and now it was time to put it into practice.